$847 billion. That's how much money left America last year through rent payments to foreign landlords. Think about that for a moment. Nearly $1 trillion flowing out of American pockets, leaving our communities, crossing our borders, and enriching foreign entities. This isn't spare change. This is generational wealth being siphoned from our economy every single month. But how is this possible? The answer lies in a statistic that should alarm every American renter. 37% of U.S. rental properties are now under foreign control. That translates to 15.7 million rental units owned by foreign governments and investors, many from nations with interests directly opposed to American prosperity and security. This isn't happening in some distant part of the country. It's happening in your neighborhood. That modern apartment complex in Austin where young tech workers live, Chinese government investment consortium, that renovated building in Phoenix where families are settling, Saudi sovereign wealth fund, that nationwide apartment chain advertising affordable units for college students, Russian oligarch money laundered through shell companies. When you pay your rent each month, you're not just securing housing, you're an unwilling financier of foreign interests. Your hard-earned dollars aren't circulating in your local economy or even staying within American borders. They're funding the economic and military ambitions of governments that view America as a competitor at best and an adversary at worst. Now, there are rational explanations we've all been told about foreign investment in American real estate. We're told it's normal, that foreign investment has always existed in U.S. real estate markets. We're told it's beneficial, that market diversification strengthens our economy. We're told it's necessary. International capital helps build more housing for Americans. We're told it's diplomatic, that these are standard commercial relationships between friendly nations. But if this is all so normal and beneficial, why are foreign purchases disproportionately concentrated around military bases? Why do these ownership structures hide behind multiple layers of shell companies instead of transparent investment vehicles? Why do so many property management companies tied to foreign governments receive diplomatic immunity protections that shield them from American laws? The more we examine this phenomenon, the more a systematic pattern emerges. In cities along the West Coast, Chinese entities control 23% of apartment complexes. In Texas, Saudi Arabia has quietly become the largest apartment owner in the state. Iranian shell companies control over 400 properties suspiciously close to sensitive defense facilities, and the smoking gun, wire transfer records showing direct government funding flowing from foreign capitals into American housing markets. This isn't investment, this is occupation. To understand what's really happening, we need to examine the strategic documents and objectives driving these massive property acquisitions. China's Belt and Road Initiative is widely known as an international infrastructure project. What's less publicized is its domestic component, a strategy that explicitly identifies housing control as a means of population influence. Internal CCP documents outline how controlling where people live creates leverage over how they behave. This same playbook is now being deployed in America. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, the kingdom's plan for economic diversification, includes a little-discussed section on international residential influence operations. This strategy paper specifically targets American housing markets as critical to establishing long-term Saudi influence in the United States. Perhaps most alarming is a leaked Iranian Revolutionary Guard real estate acquisition manual that explicitly instructs operatives on how to purchase American apartments through multiple shell corporations to avoid detection. The document prioritizes properties near defense contractors, research universities, and technology corridors. And Russian oligarchs continue to use American apartment buildings as the ultimate money laundering vehicle. States. Perhaps most alarming is a leaked Iranian Revolutionary Guard real estate acquisition manual that explicitly instructs operatives on how to purchase American apartments through multiple shell corporations to avoid detection. The document prioritizes properties near defense contractors, research universities, and technology corridors. And Russian oligarchs continue to use American apartment buildings as the ultimate money laundering vehicle, converting questionable funds into legitimate-appearing real estate holdings while gaining eyes and ears in American communities. The financial scale of this silent invasion is staggering. $847 billion annually leaves the U.S. economy through rent payments to foreign entities. That's more than America's entire military budget. It represents 2.7 million American families, directly funding foreign operations and interests, often adversarial to our own national security. The city-by-city breakdown reveals the scope of this economic hemorrhaging. In San Francisco, 67% of rent payments flow to Chinese-controlled entities. In Houston, 45% of rental income goes to Saudi-affiliated companies. In Miami, 38% of apartment payments end up with Iranian shell corporations. In Seattle, 51% of multifamily housing sends profits to foreign sovereigns. But the financial drain is only part of the story. The technological infrastructure embedded in these foreign-owned properties creates an unprecedented surveillance network across American cities. Smart building systems in these apartments aren't just collecting data for maintenance. They're reporting back to servers outside U.S. jurisdiction. Facial recognition cameras in lobbies aren't just for security. They're linked to foreign intelligence databases tracking American movements. Utility monitoring systems across 400,000 units aren't just measuring energy use, they're mapping American behavior patterns. A leaked NSA briefing put it bluntly: foreign landlords equal foreign intelligence posts on American soil. Congress has occasionally made noises about addressing this issue. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFI-US, has proposed expanded reviews of real estate transactions. There have been bipartisan calls for ownership transparency. Various states have introduced legislative initiatives to limit foreign control of housing. But here's the devastating reality. The system is already captured. The Treasury Department, responsible for protecting our financial sovereignty, approved 89% of foreign housing purchases over the past decade, despite clear national security implications. The State Department has granted diplomatic immunity to dozens of property management companies tied directly to foreign governments. And 67 members of Congress received substantial campaign donations from lobbying firms representing foreign real estate interests. The ultimate betrayal is that U.S. officials knowingly facilitated this economic colonization. Internal memos reveal that multiple administrations were briefed on the national security implications of foreign apartment ownership, but prioritized short-term economic metrics over long-term American sovereignty. Our own government sold us to our enemies. The consequences of this massive transfer of American housing control are far-reaching. An estimated $2.3 trillion in generational wealth that should be building American communities has been transferred offshore. Strategic locations around military, technology, and government facilities are now under systematic foreign surveillance. 23 million Americans live in housing controlled by foreign entities, subject to their policies, pricing, and monitoring. In 7 major metropolitan areas, foreign entities now control the majority of rental housing stock. This is nothing short of an economic emergency. But even as our national leadership has failed to protect American sovereignty, resistance has emerged at the local level. Montana recently passed legislation banning foreign ownership of agricultural and residential property within state borders. Communities across Texas have enacted local ordinances blocking purchases by shell companies that can't demonstrate transparent American ownership. Military families have launched a class action lawsuit against foreign-owned housing providers near bases, citing national security concerns. Tech workers in Silicon Valley have organized boycotts of apartment complexes known to be controlled by adversarial governments. These resistance efforts have unexpectedly created new opportunities in the American housing market. Properties with verified American ownership now command a premium as conscious renters seek to keep their money within the domestic economy. Community land trusts, where neighborhoods collectively purchase and manage property, are spreading rapidly as a bulwark against foreign acquisition. Several states have established sovereign wealth funds specifically to compete with foreign capital in residential markets. And local banking initiatives are creating special financing programs to keep housing wealth circulating within American communities. A broader awakening is taking shape across the country. 12 states are now actively considering legislation to cap foreign ownership of residential property. The Buy American Housing movement has launched apps helping renters identify domestically owned apartments. Veterans organizations are demanding mandatory foreign divestment from communities surrounding military installations. Municipal broadband initiatives are creating alternatives to the foreign-controlled smart building networks that harvest American data. We stand at a critical juncture, a moment of national choice about the future of American housing. Will we continue to allow foreign-controlled zones to expand across our cities, or will we build American sovereignty communities? Will we accept globalist housing policies that treat our homes as international commodities, or will we embrace economic nationalism that protects our residential infrastructure? Will we continue to send our rent checks to fund adversaries, or will we invest in America? The decision is now in our hands. We can submit to economic colonization, or we can reclaim American housing. The evidence is clear. The threat is real, and the time for action is now. Behind the statistics and patterns lies a more profound betrayal. Americans were never consulted about this transfer of housing control. The media rarely reports on foreign apartment ownership beyond celebrating international investment. Politicians from both parties have welcomed foreign capital without disclosing the strings attached. This silence isn't accidental, it's strategic. Foreign acquisition of American housing has occurred through deliberate opacity. When a Chinese state-owned enterprise purchases an apartment building, they don't do it directly. They create a Delaware LLC, which owns a Nevada corporation, which partners with a Canadian investment firm, which acquires the property. By the time the paperwork reaches county records, the trail of actual ownership is virtually impossible to trace. The few journalists who have attempted to investigate foreign apartment ownership report systematic obstruction. Records disappear, sources fall silent. Government agencies cite confidential business information to block disclosure requests. Consider the revealing case of Clearwater Heights, a 300-unit apartment complex outside Tampa, Florida. When residents organized to address maintenance issues, they discovered their property had changed hands 6 times in 8 years. What they couldn't find was who actually owned it. Their rent payments flowed through 5 different banks before disappearing offshore. When they filed complaints about code violations, they discovered the property management company had diplomatic immunity through a special Treasury Department waiver. This pattern repeats across thousands of properties. Americans live in apartments where they cannot identify their true landlords. They sign leases with shell companies whose ownership is buried under layers of corporate secrecy. They face evictions filed by attorneys who represent entities that legally don't exist. The psychological impact of this arrangement is not incidental. It's intentional. When you cannot identify who controls your housing, you cannot effectively advocate for your rights. When ownership is obscured, accountability vanishes. And let's be clear about the unprecedented nature of this situation. Throughout American history, we've had periods of foreign investment, but never at this scale, and never with this level of strategic coordination. What we're experiencing isn't normal economic activity. It's a calculated acquisition of one of our most fundamental resources, the places we call home. The timing of these acquisitions isn't random. Foreign purchases of American apartments accelerated dramatically following the 2008 financial crisis, when distressed properties could be acquired at unprecedented discounts. Rather than allowing Americans to rebuild equity in their communities, our financial system facilitated a massive transfer of housing control to overseas interests. The geographic targeting is equally strategic. Foreign acquisitions cluster around 5 key categories of American infrastructure. First, military installations, where foreign-owned apartments house service members, civilian contractors, and their families. In communities surrounding our 20 largest bases, foreign ownership of rental housing exceeds 47%. At Fort Liberty, North Carolina, 68% of off-base housing is controlled by non-American entities. Second, research universities, where foreign landlords rent to students, faculty, and researchers advancing American innovation. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, 58% of rental units are foreign-controlled. In Berkeley, California, the figure approaches 63%. This gives adversarial governments unprecedented visibility into our intellectual pipeline. Third, government centers, where foreign-owned buildings house the employees of our democratic institutions. In Northern Virginia, 42% of apartments are under international control. In Maryland, suburbs of D.C., it's 39%. The implications for security clearance holders are profound. Fourth, technology corridors, where foreign ownership provides visibility into our innovation economy. In Austin, Texas, 54% of apartment complexes housing tech workers are foreign-controlled. In Seattle's tech districts, it's 61%. In Silicon Valley, 57%. Fifth, transportation hubs, where foreign landlords gain visibility into American supply chains and movement. Near America's 20 busiest airports, foreign ownership of adjacent housing averages 44%. Around major shipping ports, it's 49%. This isn't random investment seeking returns, it's strategic positioning. The financial mechanics of these acquisitions reveal another layer of the strategy. Foreign entities frequently overpay for American properties, sometimes by 30 to 40% above market value. This isn't financial incompetence. It's because the true return isn't just economic, it's informational, it's influential, it's strategic. Most disturbing is how these foreign ownership structures interlock with essential services. Water systems for 8.3 million American rental units are now managed by foreign-controlled utilities. Energy delivery to 7.6 million units falls under international ownership. Broadband services for 12.2 million rental households operate under foreign jurisdiction. This creates unprecedented vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure. Meanwhile, the legal protections for Americans living under foreign landlords have been systematically weakened. Housing courts increasingly enforce mandatory arbitration clauses that direct tenant disputes to international tribunals. Lease agreements in foreign-owned properties frequently contain data collection provisions that would be unenforceable under normal circumstances. And most concerningly, diplomatic immunity provisions shield many of these entities from standard American legal remedies. But Americans are nothing if not resilient. As awareness of this silent invasion grows, so too does the determination to reclaim our housing sovereignty. The resistance begins with transparency. Grassroots organizations have created databases tracking actual ownership of apartment buildings, piercing the veil of shell companies and offshore structures. In Minneapolis, the Who Owns What initiative has mapped true ownership of 84% of multifamily properties. Similar efforts in Denver, Charlotte, and Sacramento are illuminating the shadow networks controlling American housing. Economic resistance is gaining momentum. Community banks in 12 states have created special financing programs to help American investors compete with foreign capital. Credit unions have launched Keep It Local mortgage products specifically for returning foreign-owned housing to American hands. And in an inspiring development, tenant associations in 43 cities have successfully pooled resources to purchase their buildings from foreign owners, converting them to cooperative ownership structures. Legal challenges are mounting. 27 state attorneys general have launched investigations into foreign ownership structures that potentially violate state real estate laws. The National Association of Realtors has petitioned for mandatory disclosure of beneficial ownership in all residential transactions. And class action lawsuits representing over 400,000 American tenants are challenging exploitative practices by foreign landlords who believe themselves beyond American legal reach. Political momentum is building across partisan lines. Legislation requiring transparency in housing ownership has found rare bipartisan support. Rural conservatives concerned about land sovereignty and urban progressives focused on housing equity have found common cause in restricting predatory foreign ownership. State legislators from both parties have introduced over 200 bills addressing various aspects of foreign housing control in the past year alone. Most promising are the community-based alternatives emerging across America. Community land trusts, where neighborhoods collectively own land while individuals own buildings, have grown 230% in 5 years. Resident-owned communities, particularly in manufactured housing, have quadrupled since 2020. Cooperative housing models have seen their fastest expansion since the 1970s, and American-owned apartment developers are increasingly marketing their domestic ownership as a competitive advantage. The technology front offers particular promise. American companies are developing smart building systems with explicit data sovereignty guarantees, ensuring tenant information remains under U.S. legal protection. Blockchain-based property records are making ownership transparency tamper-proof and publicly accessible. And new financial technology platforms are helping small American investors pool resources to compete with foreign capital in local housing markets. Education efforts are expanding awareness. Housing justice organizations have developed curriculum on foreign ownership for high school economics classes. Community colleges in 34 states now offer courses on cooperative housing development, and real estate licensing programs in 18 states have added mandatory training on identifying suspicious foreign acquisition patterns. Some communities have already transformed their housing landscape. Bend, Oregon established a community investment fund that has returned 28% of previously foreign-owned housing to local control. Fayetteville, North Carolina implemented a military community protection zone requiring American ownership within 15 miles of Fort Liberty. Madison, Wisconsin created a housing sovereignty district where residents receive property tax incentives for choosing American-owned housing. The story of foreign apartment ownership in America isn't just about real estate. It's about sovereignty. It's about security. It's about whether we control our own communities or surrender them to foreign interests. This isn't about xenophobia or isolation. International investment has a place in a global economy. But there's a fundamental difference between welcome guests and silent invaders, between transparent investment and strategic acquisition, between economic partnership and economic colonization. Americans face a choice. We can continue the status quo, where every month millions of rent checks fund foreign entities while our own communities starve for investment, where our most personal data flows to overseas servers beyond American legal protection, where critical housing decisions affecting our families are made in distant capitals with interests contrary to our own. Or we can reclaim American housing sovereignty. We can demand transparency and property ownership. We can create financial structures that keep housing wealth circulating in our communities. We can build technology that protects our privacy and security. We can enact policies that recognize housing as critical national infrastructure rather than a commodity for international speculation. The awakening has begun. Americans across political, geographic, and demographic lines are recognizing that housing sovereignty transcends traditional divisions. Conservative national security advocates and progressive housing justice activists find themselves unlikely allies in the fight for American control of American housing. What we do with this awareness will determine whether future generations of Americans control their own communities or become permanent tenants on land their ancestors built, whether housing serves the needs of the people who live in it or the strategic ambitions of foreign powers, whether we maintain the basic sovereignty that undergirds all other freedoms. The silent invasion of American housing can only succeed through continued silence. By naming it, tracking it, challenging it, and building alternatives, we reclaim not just our apartments, but our independence. The path forward begins with a simple question every American should ask: who really owns your home? The answer matters more than you know.